The grand chamber of the Dominion Council was cold and silent. Massive pillars stretched up to a ceiling that seemed to touch the heavens. Holographic screens floated around the circular room, each displaying reports from the farthest reaches of the galaxy. In the center stood Varric, his posture rigid, eyes staring straight ahead as the council's eyes bore into him. He knew they didn't trust him. They never had. Not after the Ravager incident. Not after he returned as the only survivor. The whispers had followed him like shadows. Coward, traitor, cursed. But he had seen the darkness, the void that defied all reason. He had felt its cold gaze, its hunger. He wasn't a coward. He was the only one who understood the danger. High Counselor Xiron leaned forward, his face stern and calculating. His red robes flowed like blood as he spoke, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. Commander Varric, you stand before us today to explain your failure. You abandoned your mission. You lost an entire fleet. And now you dare to speak of shadows. His words dripped with disdain. Varric stood firm, his fists clenched behind his back. It wasn't just shadows, High Counselor. It was an entity, alive, intelligent, and hostile. It erased the Ravager and her fleet as if they never existed. If we return, we risk losing more than just ships. We risk the existence of our very memories. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Counselors exchanged doubtful glances. Some shook their heads. Xiron's eyes narrowed. Superstitions and ghost stories. Do you think we're fools, Commander? The Dominion fears nothing. We conquer. We dominate. And we do not believe in fairy tales. Varric's jaw tightened. With respect, High Counselor, this is no fairy tale. I watched my men disappear. Their screams echoed in my mind even after they were gone. This thing, whatever it is, it feeds on fear. It learns from us. If we provoke it again, it will be ready. Xiron waved his hand dismissively. Enough of this nonsense. The Dominion will not be made a laughingstock because of your delusions. You will return to that sector with a larger fleet. You will investigate and report back with solid evidence. And this time, you will not flee like a coward. Varric's heart sank. He expected this, but it still felt like a knife to his chest. If we go back, we might not return, he warned. Then you had better make sure you do. Xiron snapped. His eyes were cold and unfeeling. Your career depends on it. The counselors turned away, their decision made. Varric was dismissed without another word. He stood there for a moment, his body rigid, anger boiling beneath his calm exterior. Then he turned sharply and walked out of the chamber, his footsteps echoing down the marble corridor. Outside the hall, Zyra and Coral waited. Zyra's face was pale, her eyes wide with worry. Coral's jaw was clenched, his muscular frame tense. They had heard the rumors. They knew what the council would decide. Zyra stepped forward. We're really going back, she whispered. Her voice trembled. Varric's eyes softened. Zyra was young, brilliant, but untested. She hadn't seen the void. She hadn't heard the whispers. Yes, he said quietly. The council has ordered it. They don't believe me. They think it's just shadows. Coral's eyes hardened. They think you're a coward. They're sending us back to prove it wrong. He spat on the ground. Those fools. They're risking all our lives for their pride. Varric placed a firm hand on Coral's shoulder. They're risking more than that. If this entity is as dangerous as I believe, it could end us all. But we don't have a choice. We go back, or we're branded as deserters. And the Dominion doesn't forgive deserters. Zyra's face went pale. But how do we fight something that isn't even real? Something that erases everything it touches? Varric looked away, his gaze distant. I don't know. But I won't let it take more of my crew. We'll find a way. We have to. Just then, Varric's communicator beeped. A message flashed across the screen, its code encrypted with an old Dominion cipher. Only high-level commanders had access to that kind of encryption. Varric's eyes narrowed as he read the words. It watches. It learns. Do not return. His blood ran cold. Who sent this? How did they know? And why did it feel familiar? Zira noticed his change in expression. Commander, what's wrong? Varric quickly erased the message, his face becoming a mask of resolve. Nothing. Just old shadows. He forced a smile. Prepare the fleet. We leave at dawn. As he walked away, his mind raced. The darkness was waiting for them, watching, learning. He had to be ready. This time, he wouldn't run. But deep down, he wondered if they were already too late. The hangar buzzed with activity. Engineers checked systems, pilots ran simulations, and soldiers loaded supplies. The hum of machinery mixed with the low murmur of anxious voices. Varric watched from the command platform, his face expressionless, but his mind raced with doubts. He glanced at his ship, the Revenant, standing proud and ready. Its sleek black hull gleamed under the hangar lights, scars from past battles still visible. It was the fastest ship in the Dominion fleet, built to outrun anything. But could it outrun shadows? Zira approached, her face pale, eyes wide with fear and excitement. The fleet's ready, Commander. 17 warships, fully armed. This is the largest force ever sent to Sector X9. Varric's lips tightened. They think numbers will keep them safe. But no fleet size matters if they don't understand what we're facing. Zira hesitated. What are we facing, sir? You never really explained. Varric's eyes darkened. Because I don't fully understand it myself. It's not a ship, not an army. It's a presence, a void that consumes. It bends reality. It erases everything. Ships, people, even memories. It feeds on fear. The more we fear it, the stronger it becomes. Zira shivered. Then how do we fight it? We don't, Varric said coldly. We survive it. A loud voice interrupted them. Coral approached, his heavy footsteps echoing on the metal floor. Commander, the Council has sent final orders. They expect a full report within 5 days. No excuses. He spat on the ground. They're sending us to our graves. Varric's jaw tightened. We'll return. I won't lose another crew to this thing. Coral's eyes softened. I trust you, Varric. Always have. But this time, something feels different. It's like we're marching into a trap. Varric looked at his old friend, memories of past battles flashing through his mind. Coral had always been by his side. Loyal, brave, unbreakable. But even Coral's voice trembled now. That was enough to make Varric's blood run cold. We go in, we investigate, and we get out. No heroics, Varric ordered. We keep our distance. We don't engage. We don't provoke it. Coral nodded. Understood. The men are scared, though. They've heard rumors, whispers about the void. They say it calls to them in their dreams. Varric's heart skipped a beat. He had heard those whispers too. They echoed in his mind, soft and tempting, like a lullaby from the darkness. Come back. Join us. He shook his head, banishing the thoughts. Those are just nightmares. The void messes with your mind. It makes you see things, hear things. We stay focused. We stay together, and we don't listen to the whispers. A voice echoed over the intercom. All crew, prepare for departure. All crew, prepare for departure. Varric looked at his ship one last time, then turned to his officers. Get to your stations. We leave now. As they walked towards the boarding ramp, Varric's communicator beeped again. Another encrypted message flashed across the screen. It remembers you. It waits. His heart skipped a beat. Who was sending these messages? How did they know? And why did the words feel so familiar? He looked around, but no one seemed to notice his hesitation. He quickly deleted the message, forcing himself to breathe steadily. Just shadows, he whispered. Just shadows. But the cold chill running down his spine told him otherwise. Minutes later, the Revenant roared to life, its engines humming with power. The fleet moved in formation, a wall of steel and firepower cutting through the stars. Varric sat in his command chair, his eyes fixed on the screen displaying Sector X9. The abyss waited for them, dark and silent, a void where no light escaped, a place that defied all logic, all reason. As they approached the edge of the sector, the temperature dropped. Frost formed on the windows. The lights flickered. A faint whisper echoed through the comms, just for a moment. "Come back. Join us." Varric's blood ran cold. He could feel it now. The darkness was watching. It remembered him. It was waiting. He tightened his grip on the armrests. "Stay sharp. Don't listen to the whispers. We're getting in and out, nothing more." Zera's voice trembled as she replied, "Understood, Commander." But her eyes were wide, and her face was pale. She had heard it too. They all had. Varric took a deep breath. The void was ready. The hunt had begun. And this time, there was no turning back. The fleet moved deeper into Sector X9, the stars growing dimmer as if the light itself was being swallowed. On board the Revenant, the temperature continued to drop. Frost now covered the corners of the viewports, thin icy veins crawling across the glass. Varric's eyes scanned the control panels. Everything was functional, yet something felt wrong. An unnatural stillness hung in the air, heavy and cold. He turned to Zera, who was staring blankly at her console. "Status report," Varric ordered, his voice firm. Zera jolted, her fingers fumbling over the controls. "All systems operational. But I'm picking up strange energy readings. It's like the sensors are looping, showing the same data again and again." Varric frowned. Could it be interference? Coral's deep voice cut in, "Not likely. Our systems are built to withstand high-level distortions. This feels like something's playing with us." Varric's chest tightened. He knew Coral was right. It was starting again. The confusion, the distortions. The void was toying with their minds. A whisper echoed through the bridge, soft and mournful. "Help us." Zera's head snapped up, her eyes wide with fear. Did you hear that?" Varric's skin prickled. He glanced at Coral, who nodded grimly. "We all did." The Revenant shuddered, its lights flickering. The whisper grew louder, more desperate. "Lost. So cold." Varric's heart raced. He recognized the voice. It was familiar, hauntingly so. "No, it can't be." Zera's face turned pale. "Commander, that voice, it sounds like..." She hesitated, her lips trembling. "It sounds like Lieutenant Kara." Varric's blood ran cold. Kara had been his second in command on his last mission to Sector X9. Her ship was the first to vanish, swallowed by the darkness without a trace. No debris, no distress signal. Just gone. Coral's face hardened. It's trickery. The void plays with our minds. It shows us what we fear, what we miss. It wants us to lose control. The whisper grew louder, echoing across the bridge. "Varric, help me. It's so dark, so cold." Varric's hands gripped the armrests, his knuckles turning white. Memories flooded back. Kara's laughter, her courage, her loyalty. She had trusted him, followed his orders without question, and he had led her to her death. He shook his head, forcing the guilt away. "No, it's not real. Kara is gone. This is just an echo, a shadow." But the voice continued, pleading, crying. It grew distorted, overlapping with other whispers. Faces began to form on the frosted glass. Pale, hollow-eyed faces. Crew members he had lost. Friends, brothers in arms. "You left us. You abandoned us." Zera backed away, her hands covering her ears. "Make it stop. Please, make it stop." Coral grabbed her shoulders, his voice firm. "Focus. Don't let it in. It feeds on fear. It wants you to break. Varric stood, his voice echoing across the bridge. Stay strong. Remember who you are, where you are. This is not real. It's the void, twisting our thoughts. The faces on the glass twisted, their eyes darkening. Their voices grew colder. You can't escape. You belong to us. The temperature dropped again. Frost spread across the floor, climbing up the walls. The lights dimmed, casting long shadows that seemed to move on their own. Varric's communicator beeped. Another message flashed. It knows your name. It remembers. His heart skipped a beat. Who was sending these messages? How did they know so much about the void? Was it someone on board? Or something else? The whispers grew angrier, more insistent. The faces on the glass became monstrous, their mouths stretching into wide, toothy grins. Their eyes glowed with malice. Zira screamed, collapsing to her knees. Coral held her tightly, whispering words of comfort. But his face was pale, his eyes haunted. Even he was struggling to hold on. Varric's communicator beeped again. Do not listen. Do not fear. It cannot touch those who are not afraid. He took a deep breath, steadying his heart. That was the key. The void fed on fear, on doubt. It grew stronger the more they believed its lies. He straightened, his voice firm and commanding. Listen to me. These are not the voices of our fallen. These are shadows, illusions. The void is trying to break us, but we will not fall. The faces on the glass screamed, their mouths stretching impossibly wide. The ship shook, the shadows growing darker. The whispers became a roar, echoing through every corridor. But Varric stood firm, his eyes blazing with defiance. We are the Dominion. We do not run. We do not fear. We fight. His words cut through the darkness, a spark of light in the consuming void. The shadows recoiled, hissing angrily. The faces faded, the frost retreating. The temperature rose, the lights brightening. Zira looked up, her eyes wide with hope. Coral grinned, his grip on her shoulders tightening. Well said, Commander. Well said. Varric's jaw tightened. This is just the beginning. The void is testing us, trying to weaken our spirits. But we will push through. We will survive. He turned to the crew, his voice unwavering. No more fear. No more doubt. We move forward. We finish the mission. The crew saluted, their faces filled with determination. The Revenant roared forward, engines blazing as it cut through the darkness. But the void watched, its whispers growing silent. It was waiting, biding its time. It was not done with them yet. Far in the shadows, something ancient stirred, its eyes opening for the first time in centuries, and it remembered Varric's name. The Revenant sped through the darkness, its engines blazing as it navigated the shifting shadows of Sector X9. The void seemed to twist and ripple around them, bending light and space in ways that defied logic. Yet Varric's resolve remained firm. They would not break. Not here. Not now. On the bridge, Coral monitored the sensors, his eyes narrowing. These readings are unstable. It's like the space around us is alive. Zira shivered, her fingers trembling over her console. Alive or haunted. Varric's gaze hardened. Stay focused. It wants to distract us, confuse us, but we're stronger than that. But even as he spoke, the shadows outside began to shift. They moved like smoke, curling around the ship's hull, pressing against the viewports. For a moment, faces seemed to form within the darkness. Faces twisted in agony, eyes hollow and soulless. Zira's breath hitched. Commander, do you see that? Varric's jaw tightened. Ignore it. It's not real. But his heart raced, because one of those faces looked painfully familiar, a face he had seen countless times before, on his father. He turned away, refusing to look, but the shadows continued to press against the glass, whispering softly, "You abandoned us. You let us die." The words were like daggers, piercing through Varric's mind. Memories flooded back. His father's proud smile, his firm hand on Varric's shoulder, his last words before his ship was lost in Sector X9. Be strong, Varric. Protect them, no matter the cost. Varric's fists clenched. No, it's just another trick, another illusion. But the voice continued, pleading. You failed me, Varric. You failed us all. He shut his eyes, the guilt tightening around his heart. He had tried to save them. He had done everything he could. But it hadn't been enough. He hadn't been strong enough. Coral's voice cut through the haze. Commander, energy spike ahead. Varric's eyes snapped open. On the main screen, a massive vortex of swirling shadows appeared, its core pulsing with eerie light. It looked like a tear in reality, a gateway into something ancient and hungry. What is that? Zyra whispered, her face pale. Coral's voice was grim. It's not on any map. It's new. Varric's communicator beeped. Another message. The gate has opened. Do not enter. It is the source. His chest tightened. The source. The heart of the void. The reason why Sector X9 devoured everything that entered. But before he could respond, the ship's lights flickered. Alarms blared. Commander, Zyra shouted. We're being pulled in. The gravity field. It's off the charts. Varric's eyes widened. The vortex was drawing them closer, its pull growing stronger with every second. The ship shuddered, metal groaning under the pressure. Full reverse thrusters. Stabilize our trajectory. Varric barked. Coral's hands flew over the controls. Engines at maximum power, but were barely slowing down. The vortex pulsed, its shadows stretching out like claws, wrapping around the ship, dragging it closer. The faces in the shadows grew clearer, their eyes hollow and accusing. You brought them here. You condemned them. Varric's vision blurred. Memories overlapped with reality, his father's face merging with the shadows. He could almost feel his father's hand on his shoulder, heavy and cold. He shook his head, fighting the illusion. No, you're not real. You're just echoes. But the shadows whispered back, their voices cold. Echoes of the past, of your failure. The ship shuddered again, the vortex growing larger on the screen. The gravity field was overwhelming, twisting space around them. The hull creaked, the metal groaning as if about to collapse. Coral cursed under his breath. If we get any closer, we'll be crushed. Zyra's voice trembled. Commander, what do we do? Varric's eyes narrowed. There was only one option left. Divert all power to the engines. We break free or we break apart. Coral hesitated. All power. That includes life support. We'll only have minutes before. Do it, Varric shouted. That's an order. Coral's jaw tightened, but he obeyed, fingers dancing over the controls. Power diverted. Engines at 150% capacity. Structural integrity dropping. The ship roared, its engines blazing with white-hot energy. The pull of the vortex lessened, just enough to slow their descent. But the shadows grew angrier, their faces twisting with rage. You cannot escape. You belong to us. Varric's voice was cold. I belong to no one. The shadows howled, their forms stretching, clawing at the ship's hull. The glass cracked, frost spreading across the floor. The temperature plummeted, the air growing thin. Zyra gasped, clutching her chest. Air. Can't. Breathe. Varric's vision blurred as the oxygen levels dropped. But he held firm, his hand steady on the controls. Almost. There. Hold on. The ship roared again, its engines burning brighter, tearing through the gravity field. The vortex shuddered, the shadows recoiling. And then, with a burst of light, the Revenant broke free, hurtling away from the vortex at breakneck speed. The shadows screamed, their voices echoing through the void before fading into silence. The ship stabilized, its lights flickering back to life. Coral gasped, air flooding his lungs as life support returned. Zira collapsed in her seat, her eyes wide with relief. Varric's communicator beeped one last time. You escaped, but it remembers. It will come for you. His hands trembled as he read the message. Who was sending these warnings? And what was this? It that remembered him. He looked back at the vortex, now distant and fading. But even from afar, he could feel its cold gaze, watching him, waiting. Whatever it was not done with him yet. And Varric knew, the echoes of the past would soon become the nightmares of the present.